Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Your Stake, Your Story. We're a video series focused on highlighting the best practices in values-based investing for financial advisors and their clients. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Frank Dixon. Frank is the creator of System Change Investing, which we'll be discussing today in depth on this video series session. And previously, he was the managing director of research for the largest corporate sustainability research firm in the world, Innovest, which is now part of MSCI. Frank, thanks so much for joining.
Sure, Gabe. It's a pleasure to be here, and congratulations to you for your high rating on your excellent ESG platform.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And based on customer satisfaction, we really love our customers, and it's good to know that it's mutual.
Well, I know a lot about ESG, and I've been through your site and your tools and looked at them in depth, and they're excellent. I can see why we're rated number one.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I'd love to dive right into system change investing, which is something that you're the creator of, and would love to hear you describe maybe your initial story of why you created it
Mhm.
and what it means for today's markets as well.
I'd be glad to do that. Let me just quickly summarize what it is up front, and then my story will bring it up to
Mhm.
present. It's a new type of ESG. Current ESG, even though it's mainstream and huge at 40 trillion, environmental and social problems, SDG problems are getting worse in many cases. So as good as it is, it implies it's not good enough. And the reason for that is it's mostly focused on changing companies instead of the systems that compel companies to cause climate change and other problems. And it's focused on symptoms such as climate change instead of root causes. So the best that current ESG can do is probably just slow the rate of environmental and social descent, as we've seen over the past 20 years. A new approach to ESG is needed that shifts the focus to system change and root causes. That's what system change investing does. I think it's got the potential to capture major ESG market share. It can help asset managers to increase assets under management and returns and position themselves as leaders. So kind of that's basically what it is in a nutshell. I'll talk about how it works, but first my story. After business school, I got really interested in sustainability, and I found this excellent job in New York at Innovest as the head of research, and they were kind of pioneering positive screening. Up to that point in 1998, ESG had been mostly negative screening, avoiding sectors for ethical reasons. They said, no, you can make more money with ESG by staying in sectors and shifting investments to sustainability leaders. And I, as the head of research, developed their models and research procedures. And we were proving that. We found in almost every sector that the sustainability leaders were outperforming, mainly because they were better managed companies, but also because they were doing a better job of managing ESG risks and opportunities. But after a while, of overseeing the rating of the world's 2,000 largest companies for many years, I saw that not one of them had any hope of getting close to full impact mitigation or sustainability. I estimated that they could only profitably mitigate about 20% of their total negative impacts.
Mm.
Beyond that point, their costs would go up. And if they continued to mitigate, they'd put themselves out of business. And the reason for this is that our economic and political systems are developed from a reductionistic perspective, so they have unintended consequences. And one of them is that they essentially compel companies to cause climate change and other major problems. Our systems, although no one intended this, essentially say to companies, if you don't harm the environment and society, you'll go out of business. Now, companies can make more money by lowering their harm, but and in certain cases, they can get rid of whole categories of harm. But overall, they can't come close to not harming the environment and society. So current ESG is based on basically a flawed premise. We're asking companies to voluntarily go beyond regulations to stop harming the environment and society. And if they do, they'll be put out of business. That's why it can't work in its current form. The companies do cause harm, not because they're poorly managed or they don't have the right ESG strategy. That's part of the reason, but the main reason is that our economic and political systems force them to. So I saw that we could use ESG to encourage companies to engage in system change in the same way that it successfully encouraged them to engage in sustainability. And the approach is to rate companies on system change performance, use those ratings to guide investment decisions, are showing how that'll identify better managed companies, enhance returns in other ways. And then as investors start sending the system change signal to companies by paying attention to it and shifting investments to system change leaders, companies will be compelled to implement system change strategies. So I developed the first model for rating companies on system change performance 20 years ago in 2003. But I quickly saw that we need more research about what system change is overall. Because to rate a company on system change performance, you need a frame of reference. For companies on ESG, you need to know their negative impacts. Then analysts can assess the effectiveness in their efforts to mitigate those impacts.
Mm-hmm.
To assess whether or not a company has a good system change strategy, you have to know what system change is overall. What does human society look like in sustainable form? How do we get there? What are the systemic changes needed? What are the actions needed to bring about those changes? With that overarching framework, we're now in a position to say, what's the optimal corporate role in system change? And then when we know what the relevant system changes are for a company, then we can say, is the company focused on the most important system change, or are they engaged in system change greenwashing? So I published a series of books called Global System Change that provides that framework for rating. And I've evolved the SCI model ever since. There are many different ways to do system change investing. I think it's going to be as important a change in ESG as a shift from negative to positive screening was, because this is the first form of ESG that actually has a potential to achieve the SDGs, because it's focusing on root causes and changing the systems that created the need for the SDGs in the first place.
So you mentioned that you did analysis, and at least at the time that you did it, companies could only reduce their negative impact about 20% profitably in certain scenarios. And that number kind of stuck with me. That's really interesting. So system change investing, I'm guessing, is going far beyond that 20%. Is the argument that are you still making the argument towards short-term profitability, or is this more of a, yeah, you're not going to be profitable initially. There's only that 20% that you can do, but this is a long-term trend what is the case that you make from the relation to financial performance side?
Well, the investors and companies will make money in the short term for the following reasons. The business case basically is that companies are currently required to harm the environment and society unintentionally. Nobody intended that. In a closed system, those negative impacts come back and hurt companies in the form of reputation damage, lawsuits. So companies can benefit by lowering impacts. Currently, they can only go up, and this is a very general number. It's different for every company and sector, but I just use 20%. They can only go up to 20% profitably. So typically, corporate sustainability strategies, they do all they can until it becomes unprofitable, and then they probably stop. So the new approach that I'm advocating for companies and for investors is do everything you can under current systems. All current ESG is outstanding. I mean, I'm not criticizing it in any way. We should do it, increase it by fivefold. But then instead of stopping when it becomes unprofitable, work with others collaboratively to change the economic and political systems or sector level systems that are creating the situation where you can only profitably mitigate 20%. Once those systems are changed, I mean, under sustainable systems, companies will maximize profits by causing no harm. Under current systems, they maximize profits by causing harm. I could get into the systemic changes that would be needed for that. So right now, companies benefit from sustainability leadership, better stakeholder relations, better workforce. There's a list of benefits goes on, and it's been known for many years. Going forward, once it becomes clear that system change is the most important sustainability issue, for a company to maintain their sustainability leadership, they'll have to have a strong system change component in terms of that the raters, that's who they're going to give the highest ratings to. So system change leadership is going to produce many of the same benefits as sustainability leadership. Another part of the business case is to recognize that all flawed systems change throughout human history. Our systems put business in conflict with society and humanity in conflict with nature. those systems inevitably will change, and it usually happens fast, like the American and French Revolution. With all the insanity we see in the world right now, our systems almost certainly are in the process of breaking down. As that occurs, the negative impacts on investors and companies are going to grow. People are more and more going to realize that the problem is the system, not the company. The company has a lot of power over government, over media. They can use that power instead of blocking system change like they normally do to
Yeah.
drive it. So because it's a better measure of management quality, shifting to system change leaders, SCI funds, I'm sure I have a lot of experience with this, can at least match the performance of current ESG, if not outperform. So investors will make more money. Also, it's the first ESG that actually has a potential to achieve the SDGs. So it's going to attract new investment. It's going to position asset managers as sustainability leaders, and it's going to help companies to maintain, ones that are already leaders, to maintain their sustainability leadership. So it's going to benefit business and investors in the short term, and society hugely benefit in the short and the long term.
Wow. So let me ask you a two-part follow-up there. What should companies do to create, or what can and should companies do to create system change is part one.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you evaluate that and measure that?
Okay.
Part two.
So again, there's no one right way to do system change investing. There, just like there's many different ways to do ESG. So as a modeler, I have certain ideas, but there are forms of ESG happening now. For example, investing in the green economy is one form of system change investing. There are other groups that are looking at the portfolio-wide impact of climate change and other SDG problems. That's another form of system change investing. The form that I'm advocating is to give companies a rating on their system change performance and use that to guide investments. As that occurs, companies are going to be compelled to implement system change strategies. And what those will look like in many ways will be similar to sustainability. So one, do they have a strategy? Are they talking about system change? Have they identified system change goals? Are they tracking and reporting progress on it? Is there accountability? Are people being held responsible? Also, have they identified necessary system changes at the sector level and the overarching system levels? So those are in the model that I use a whole system approach, I think, which looks at the big picture, what does sustainability look like, and then use that to define the optimal corporate role in that. And then aspects of that become metrics in SCI rating models. So sample metrics would be the presence of a system change strategy, business consciousness. Are they using whole system thinking? Are they collaborating with others to drive system change? Are they using media and other means to unite citizens together on their many common interests? Are they supporting other system change organizations? Many things like that.
How much of this is also touching political contributions or trade associations or other involvement from that perspective? I know my own way that I personally got into this whole field of sustainable investing and ESG was looking into ExxonMobil's political contributions and its membership in trade associations that were promoting information on climate change that was contrary to established climate science and Exxon's own publicly stated position on climate change. So that was being an obstruction to systems change. But there's a lot of really interesting organizations that track political activity and show for many different issues, not just, but let's just stick with climate change for this example, which companies are actually the most supportive of pro-climate policy. How much of system change is direct political engagement?
Well, there have been system change metrics and ESG models for 20 years, and you've just pointed out some of them: lobbying, campaign finance, other ones are media campaigns. So that is a part of it. Typically, companies have blocked systemic changes that threaten profitability. But as these systems create growing problems for companies, the smart ones, and there are ones that are already doing this, will go to government and say, hold me more responsible instead of less, so that I can profit by acting responsibly. The meta system flaw is the failure to hold companies fully responsible for negative impacts. That's the mechanism in competitive markets that makes it impossible to fully mitigate in many cases. And they're all different ways that happens: externalities, limited liability, many other things.
Hmm.
So one of the things you'd want to look at, not just lobbying in campaign finance, but what are they lobbying for? What are they using the campaign finance dollars for?
Hmm.
What are they asking government to do? So the meta category would be, are they going to government and saying, hold us more responsible? There might be specific externalities in a particular sector or for a particular company. That would be a mid-level system change.
Hmm.
High-level system change would be, are they trying to evolve the economic and political system so that they deal with externalities overall? And also, we have a key, the foundation of all of this and my models is the laws of nature. For 3.8 billion years, the laws of nature have controlled all life on Earth, and they will 100% determine the extent to which humanity survives and prosper. Nature doesn't care about our philosophies, such as socialism or capitalism. All it cares about implicitly is, are we abiding by the laws of nature? And these are laws that have been there for a long time. They apply to living systems at all levels. We have to align our systems with those laws. They are things like equitable resource distribution, seeking balance, not growth,
Hmm.
producing no waste. We know that's what's going to happen on Earth. What we don't know is whether or not humans will be here. And for us to be here, we have to start doing those things.
Hmm.
So that's not based on a philosophy. The laws of nature give you an objective reality framework for assessing system change performance. But that's getting pretty complex and involved. In the early stages, I would suggest, and I think it's probably going to happen, that simpler models will be used. Not so much the whole system approach that I've outlined. I'm ready to help an organization with that if they want to, and I'm talking to some about it. But simpler models might be just looking, are companies even discussing the importance of system change? Have they integrated into their sustainability strategies? Also, many companies are also engaged in system change activities without using the system change label.
Mm.
There's a lot of collaboration. Unilever, for example, with the
Hmm.
Sustainable Food Lab, that's been around for a long time. There are many examples like that of where companies are collaborating with different segments of society and other companies.
Hmm.
So there's a lot already going on that can be rated.
So what should listeners, which most of the audience for this podcast is financial advisors, how can financial advisors get system change data, do evaluations on their own? How can they apply everything that you're saying here if they are interested in this concept and this framework? What should they do with it?
Well, I'm out speaking to different allies now about launching SCI funds. So if there's any of them that are in a position or interested in it, I'm glad to speak with them about it. The first step is to rate companies on system change performance, and that can be done very simply. In certain cases, you'll be able to pull SCI metrics from existing ESG databases, maybe supplemented with a little bit of information, for example, like the NGOs that you talked about that measure campaign finance and lobbying. So that's one part of it, the research. The other part is the marketing, internal and external, helping a company to understand why SCI is important and then selling customers on it. And then the third part is fund management. How do you integrate system change ratings with existing ESG and financial analysis to produce superior products?
Hmm.
People can contact me through my website, globalsystemchange.com. And I'm glad to answer anybody's questions about it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I have one last question, which is a curveball, if that works for you.
I like curveball.
Cool. So by the time this podcast comes out, we could be living in even a accelerated world already. Essentially, AI is moving so fast, especially GPT, and that is changing systems and will change systems at an accelerating pace. How should companies be leading in this system change that is happening right now? And are there any leaders that you've identified?
Well, there's already a lot of ESG researchers that are using AI. It's a great tool. It already is helping humanity. It's got a lot of potential. I think sometimes that people impute qualities to it that it doesn't have. It's not conscious. It's not alive. It's simply a tool, and the creator of that reminds us of that. It doesn't have the heart. It doesn't love its kids like we do. It doesn't care about the survival of humanity in the same way that your toaster doesn't care. So let's not get too much of an inflated opinion about AI. It's we, the people, that will determine what happens on this planet, and AI will be a tool and will tell it what to do for us. But I think that there's some very good uses for it. It's already helping with ESG analysis. Obviously, AI can do a lot of things that humans can't, like scan 1 billion documents at once. But there's a lot of things that human analysts can do that AI analysts can't, like, interpret a document. It hasn't been coded yet. We're just so much more. The human mind is almost infinitely more sophisticated than AI can ever be. So I think it's a tool. Let's use it, but let's remember that we're in charge here, not AI.
And are there any corporate leaders or actions that you think that companies should be taking as it gains more widespread adoption?
Well, I'm not an expert on that, but I think it's obviously in many cases already producing a lot of value. I'm working with Capgemini; they're leaders in AI, and they're looking to use it in ESG more. So Capgemini is one of them. I don't know a lot of specific examples on that, but it's going to play a big part going forward. But mainly, I think we, the people, have to kind of decide what we want, and that's how the SCI models are developed. We have to develop the models, and then we can tell AI to help us implement them. So, I guess in terms of corporate examples, Capgemini is the one that comes to mind for me.
Cool. Any final thoughts that you want to share?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I think this is a time of great opportunity for humanity. We've entered a period of rapid system change. If you look at history, all flawed systems collapse, as I said, and I think that's happening right now. So we have to start proactively paying attention to root causes and changing systems. And I think the single most powerful tool to do that is to use the capital markets. The corporate and financial sectors are often the most powerful segments of society. They're driven by investing mainly. If we use investing to drive system change, I don't think there's any other single activity available to humans in any area that could drive achievement of the SDGs and sustainability faster. So it's a very important approach, and I'm sure it's going to take off. I saw this 20 years ago that this is where it's going, and a lot of people are talking about it now. So it's the time for it.
Frank, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thanks, Gabe. It's been a pleasure.